Firstly, remove the anode by undoing the 3 plastic screws. Removing the last screw and the anode comes off. Next, back off the Allen screw a few turns in the boss of the propeller.
Next, remove the propeller nut. When removing the propeller, be careful the key doesn't drop out. Secure it to the shaft. To remove the end caps, clean carefully around the joint and insert a peg spanner into 2 of the 4 holes in the cap and clamp the tool firmly in place. If Loctite's been used, it can be quite difficult to undo, and the spanner may distort if not clamped on tightly. Give the spanner a good tap with a hammer. With the end cap removed, the tab lock bolt is exposed. Remember, this is left-hand thread and undoes clockwise. Remember to lever up the bent locking tab before unscrewing. Older versions of the Autoprop used a lower tab washer. I've left mine in. If yours has one of these, make sure to bend back the locking tab before undoing the nut. This shot is showing the lock nut and tab washer removed. The blade will now slide off, and you can see the ball race in 2 parts there. The part still attached to the boss and the other part on the blade. We'll clean these up and take the bearings out now. Okay, the bearings have been removed now from the blade, and cleaning out using petrol. You can see the other parts of that have been removed. These can all be cleaned up quite easily with petrol. The lip seal is still in place, so I'm going to clean up carefully around it. It's still in good condition, and I'll remove that shortly. So I'm just cleaning it thoroughly with petrol, get any old grease out. Using a pair of pliers, grip hold of the lip as low down as you can and work the seal out. When it starts to come, stop, and it should just pull out, work your way around nice and easy so as not to damage it. Okay, there's the lip seal out. Now all that's remaining is the ball race lip in here. This can be quite difficult to get out, but I'll show you an easy way. Found the quickest way to get this, the shell of this bearing out, is simply to clean it as well as you can with petrol. Get as much grease out as you can. Find a good hardwood block and give it a good wallop. And there it is. Quick and simple. I find a G-clamp can come in handy at times just to hold things in place while trying to undo things. Okay, this is the boss. This is the bottom part of the ball race. And once again, if you give it a sharp tap on this edge, being careful not to damage the thread, so just hit it on the edge of that there, and I'll give that a tap and it should just pop out. There we go. Just popped out. Make sure you clean it well with petrol first. Okay, to clean the blades, I've found the best things to use are these. They're like a hard Scotch-Brite, and these ones are like a hard felt finish. So I'll just show you how quickly it comes up. Doesn't take long at all to clean the blades. Stay away from the edge because it will destroy these, so keep it flat on the blade as much as possible. You can always finish the edges later. Clean all the internal areas of the blade and hub with a very fine wet and dry paper or emery cloth. Okay, we've got the Autoprop cleaned up nice and clean, and we're going to reassemble with new bearings and seals. If you don't have the use of compressed air to clean out the grease gallery, I would normally just put the grease nipple in and pump a bit of fresh grease in until it comes out the inside, and wipe it all clean. So you can see here where the lip seal goes, and where it mates, where it seals on the boss, is this groove here. You can see if I put it in place, it's very important that this this face here is perfectly clean, otherwise the lip seal here simply won't seal. So make sure everything is spotlessly clean. This is where the ball race sits in, nice and clean, and everything's nice and clean in here. This is where the seal will sit into here when we get it in place. Okay, we're now going to fit the outer half of the tapered roller bearing into the blade, and make sure that it goes in this way with the large opening at the top. We simply press it in there, press it down, and make sure that it's flush with just below the top. We can now have a look at the bottom and make sure that it's seated nice and neatly on the bottom flange, which it is. Shortly the roller bearing will just simply drop into place and the rest will be assembled. Alright, next we're going to fit the lip seal, and I like to put a little bit of lanolin just around the bottom of the lip seal. Make sure that the recess it fits into is spotlessly clean, and it's just a matter of working your way around and pressing it in. Once it starts to go, you can just run your hand around and it should just pop into place nice and neatly. This is where we need to make sure that it's pressed in properly. I'm just going to use the edge of the hammer, the handle, and make sure it's worked in nice and tight. All the way around. And a quick check. Make sure it's nice and even and sitting nicely in the recess. Could use a little bit more this side. Okay, and there we go. The lip seal is now in place. You can clean that off. Okay, we're now ready to fit the bearings to the blade and hub. And you'll notice that the thrust bearing comes in 3 parts. The 2 outer parts have a different diameter, and it's important to fit the they both have the same outside diameter. The inside diameter is slightly different, 2 millimeters difference, and it's important to fit the larger of the inside diameter to the blade. If you hold them together, you can actually see the difference. So I'll fit the larger diameter one to the blade. That presses in there nicely. Just make sure it's in. Of course, making sure that the seating is perfectly clean. the smaller diameter ID gets fitted to the boss. So you can check it's all nicely fitted. Okay, we're now ready to assemble the unit. We'll fit the ball bearings to the hub and making sure that it stays in place. Fit the blade just to the boss. We'll now take the taper roller bearing, make sure it's clean, everything's clean, and locate it into the thing. We now take one of our little lock tabs with the tab facing down. It locates in a little slot in the side here, and just press that over the top, and we can now go ahead and tighten up the lock screw. This needs to be torqued up with a torque wrench. The recommended torque setting is 14.7 foot-pounds or 20 Newton meter. Okay, the tab washer is in place and the lock nut has been tightened up finger tight. So now we're going to use the tool supplied and lock it on there. We need a torque wrench, and the setting is 14.7 foot-pounds, which I've preset on here. So the simplest way, without vices and all the rest, is simply to put your foot on it and torque up until it clicks. You can hear the torque wrench clicking. So now we need to make sure the blade is free. It's a little bit stiff, but that's probably fairly new. It's normal with new bearings, so it feels free, and there's no wobbling at all on the bearing. Could even be backed off a tiny bit perhaps, but once it's got grease in it, it should free up. Okay.
This Autoprop is an earlier version which was modified to take the new tab locking bolt at the top. The tab washer under the nut is from the old system, and I simply put it in place as a backup. It isn't really necessary. Notice that there are slots in the locking nut, and one of them will line up with a tab on the locking bolt, which you must bend over into the slot to lock the bolt in place. Notice that this bolt has a left hand thread and is tightened anti-clockwise, opposite to the normal type of thread. On the top cap there's an O-ring which seals on the bevel on the blade. Remove the O-ring and replace it with a new one. These are available at any bearing supply shop. Refit the cap and tighten with the peg spanner. Be sure to nip it up nice and tight. You'll notice I haven't used any Loctite, as I find it makes it very difficult to remove at the next service. This is my third full service in 6,000 hours over 17 years, and I've never had any problem with threaded fittings coming undone. The manufacturer does, however, recommend using Loctite, so I'll leave it up to you to decide. You can give the peg spanner a little tap just to make sure it's nipped up. blade is now nice and free and no sign of play. Blade's nice and free. Now that the old end caps are back in place, we can fit the grease adapter and nipple. The instructions I received advised to fit the nipple to the cap, but I notice on the manufacturer's video they advised to fit it to the blade. Perhaps my instructions were for the earlier model. I suspect either place will work as long as the blade is rotated frequently while pumping grease until it exits the other plug hole. Continue pumping to make sure there are no air pockets coming out with the grease. These will be quite obvious as you're pumping. Once that's done, we can put the small plugs back in with new O-rings fitted. The Autoprop is now back on the shaft on the boat. The key and keyway and shaft were thoroughly cleaned. The propeller nut is tightened up and wired or pinned in place. Note that the anode fixing face is cleaned up to give a good contact with the anode. I'll just give the anode a quick rub on some sandpaper to remove any oxidization. The grub screw which locks onto the propeller nut can be tightened up firmly. This will prevent the nut from undoing. Now the anode can be fitted with the 3 plastic screws, and that's the job done. I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it useful.